However you all want to answer this, but my thought on this is here, I always want to hear the inside baseball about a court, and she's probably not going to tell us, but I'm going to try. Okay. Can you think of a time or a case where you really felt, and I think you answered a little bit in your speech, where the court was divided, but the issue or the concept of the rule of law, somebody put it out on the table and it really became a guide to a decision?
Thank you. Can you all hear? Is this working? Okay. I would say the answer to that, Todd, is often. I don't want to go into the nuts and bolts of our 7-person discussion on any given issue, but I do want to make 2 points with respect to that question. Number one, as I said, there are 7 justices on the Kentucky Supreme Court. There are 2 things that I think give you great confidence that there is a rule of law. One of them is if as a justice or a judge, Judge Edwards, if you have never had to decide a case in a way that maybe you personally, my personal thought of what's fair or just comes into the equation, but the law says I have to, my personal thought is I need to do X on a case. It seems the most fair to me. But I look at the statutes, case law, whatever governs that issue, and Y is the answer. If you never, as a judge, have had to decide Y instead of X, that's how you know there's a rule of law. I am bound to follow the law. Now, all is not lost. Don't worry that I'm deciding Y when I think X is the best answer. That's where either A, we need to hint, or they need to look, the legislature needs to look and maybe change or amend that. That's also where lives the gray area of the law, where you may interpret something not to reach an absurd result. But you know there's a rule of law because we as judges apply that law. The other reason you know that there's a rule of law is you would think among the 7 of us, I'm looking out the Jefferson County window. I have a colleague who's looking out the Paducah, Kentucky window, and one who's looking out the Ashland, Kentucky window. And I can tell you that of the 7 of us, there is no group of 3 or 4 who are always together on any given issue. On a business issue, on an issue of whether we're going to uphold a criminal verdict from a trial, Commonwealth Attorney Withers, we might be in different factions on any given case. Now, I will say on the cases we call political hot button issues, the ones people are looking at and seen as more political when we're looking at a statute and whether it's constitutional, looking at whether something is a constitutional right. I would say, honestly, there are probably trends among the court. You would trend to think maybe these justices would be this way, but again, that is not absolute. So the 2 ways you know that we are different from your legislative branch or your executive branch in terms of partisan or political sway is that we have to decide things based on the law. We're not deciding things based upon our own. You may want me to do that if you like me, but if you don't, that's not what you hire me to do. You hire me to apply the law. The other thing that you know is that the justices among us, there may be 4 of us who want to uphold a verdict and 3 who don't, or vice versa, and it isn't the same group. So you know that we are independently looking at those cases and applying the law. And then obviously the ultimate reassurance is when all 7 of us decide a case the same, which also happens more frequently than you think because those don't get the attention. But I think the court does uphold the rule of law, and I am there also working towards that regularly.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Justice Bissinger. Judge Edwards, when you're debating with yourself, instead of a panel of 7, my question for you is you're on a court that sees a really large volume of cases that are sort of, you think they're kind of the same, but maybe they're not. Criminal trials, sentencing, probation decisions, torts, contracts, disputes, this sort of thing. Is there one of those areas where you think a demonstration of the rule of law is important? Where you you think the court is called upon to demonstrate to everybody watching you that we do live under that regime of equality before the law like you just talked about, instead of ruled by fiat or wealth or personal and political power? How do you do that as a circuit judge?
All right. I can think of a couple areas that come to mind where I think about how the rule of law, and it's paramount in my mind when I'm making decisions, how the rule of law should apply to everyone equally. In the criminal context, we frequently get cases in which it's a criminal case, perhaps there's a stop or a search, and an individual is challenging the legality of those stops and the constitutionality of those stops and searches. And we have hearings in which I have to make decisions as to whether or not this individual's constitutional rights were violated. And this is an area that really strikes me as one where it's incumbent upon judges to think about how the rule of law has to apply equally to everyone. So I am going to look to make sure that an individual's Fourth Amendment rights, that they are protected, whether they're driving a Mercedes in Anchorage or whether they're riding a bicycle in Portland. It doesn't matter what their wealth is. It doesn't matter what the vehicle looks like. What matters is whether or not their rights as individuals and citizens in our country to have the reasonable expectation of privacy have been violated. Okay, and I'm going to make those same decisions, and I try my hardest to not judge a case just based upon the area of town, the complexion of an individual's skin, those type of factors that should play no role in the determination as to whether or not an individual's constitutional rights have been violated. Now, in the civil side, area of law that we're seeing more and more cases pop up are as our society ages. You see a lot of people, I think most of us here may have had a loved one who's been put into a facility, an elder care facility, maybe a memory care facility, something of that sort. And frequently, when that happens, if something arises and a claim emerges from their care, their treatment in that facility, we see disputes as to whether or not that claim should be adjudicated in the court, or whether it should go to some sort of informal type of adjudication, perhaps an arbitration process. And it's important that as a court system, as a judge, that we look at those cases and we hold both sides accountable, and that we hold them to the letter of the law as to, when we look at those agreements, what was actually agreed upon and what were the circumstances when that agreement was reached. A lot of times these individuals are at their most vulnerable places. You know, they're ill, they're sick, their memories may be compromised, they don't have a lot of resources. Families are doing anything they can to get help. And when you see some of these agreements, you look at it, and a lot of times you have to reach the conclusion that the playing field was not equal when these folks got to the table and reached these agreements. So I don't mean to say that I am going to not provide fairness and make people honor an agreement that they made, but I do want to make sure that if that playing field was unequal, that I factor that into the context in which I'm making my decisions. So both of those scenarios go to, do we have a system that is going to treat people regardless of their wealth, regardless of their status in the community, regardless of the power of their attorneys and the prestige of their attorneys? Are we going to treat them all the same? Or are we going to let that scale tip towards the side that has more power, more money, more influence? And that's what the role of a judge is, in making sure that the rule of law is protected and the rule of law applies to everyone.
All right, thank you, Judge Edwards. So much thoughtfulness of Commonwealth's Attorney Weathers. I would like you to let folks know how the Commonwealth's attorney is not just another lawyer for a side. People sue each other, and they each have sort of equal and opposite lawyers. One tries to keep them from getting the money, and the other side wants to get the money. And I think people think often that the prosecutor is just one of those. You just go to convict somebody, and that's your whole job. But you and I know that's not true, but tell everybody else how that's not.
Thank you, Todd. There are 47 Commonwealth attorneys in the entire state that's taking care of 4 million people. There are a little bit over 120 counties. And what we do is that we protect the community. We keep the community safe. We are the ones that make sure that we are considered the government. We are there to make sure that the rule of law is followed. When we also have to make sure that we are doing the right things. And it's a difficult balance, I think. And the other part of it is just educating the community. I also have my old boss, who's on his way out, is the county attorney. They deal with the misdemeanors. But for us, we deal with all of the felonies that happen and take place all throughout the city. But we also have to deal with some cases that are not just in the Commonwealth. So we work with, on the federal level many times, we work with the Attorney General's office. And so when we talk about just the idea of prosecution, you never heard me say that when I came up there and said hello. It really is about making sure that we follow and honor the law, but do it in the right way. And yes, there are sides, but our side is to keep the community safe. So that's why sometimes it's difficult when you're protecting a child who's been abused, and you're trying to determine what should happen. We're going to need everybody in this process to see what that means. We've got the other side that may not want the person who harmed the child to be in jail, but we also don't want the child to be harmed and go home to a home that's not safe. So those things, I think that's the excitement about when people say, don't you get tired of it? I mean, there is an excitement about being able to love the law and to be able to argue the law based on the people that we protect. I mean, there's nothing like it. I mean, when we're talking about protecting our people in this Commonwealth, and that's what we do. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. I think once upon a time, and all of these panels may remember, the Supreme Court, long ago in the 40s maybe, said the finest office to carry out the rule of law is the office of Commonwealth's attorney. So Niemeyer, I think, is the decision. Aaron, from the Attorney General's office, how do you convince people that the rule of law can persist from one administration to another in one of these elected prosecutors' offices? I've been through it. And we're not talking about just a change of political parties. We've had that happen. I, for example, was in an administration that followed the same political party, but we had a very different philosophy of how to run the Attorney General's office. And now we've seen a political party divide be crossed, and you've been across two administrations of different people in the same political party. So how do you operate so that people don't think, well, you just overturn everything? You know, if the R's run the AG's office now, they're going to throw everything out and do something. And if the D's get the office again, they're throwing all the R stuff out. Now, how do you convince people that it doesn't just work like that?
Todd, that's a really good question. When folks ask me about what I do or what my office does at the Office of the Attorney General, the first thing I usually tell them is I work at the intersection of law and politics. And we can't get around the fact that in our state, we elect our state attorneys general on a partisan ballot. And so there's going to be a Republican, there's going to be a Democrat, or what have you. But there are going to be areas where one attorney general to the next is going to disagree. I'll give you just one kind of a meta view that you may have noticed. My current boss, the Attorney General Russell Coleman, is a career prosecutor. And so he very much approached things as a prosecutor would when he took office. And he emphasized those aspects of our office that have to do with the criminal justice system. And so there's been a lot more emphasis placed, for example, on providing support to Commonwealth's attorneys out in the state, and really, spending our time and our resources in those areas, trying to back those people up who are on the front lines every day, like Ms. Weathers is. The prior Attorney General, who I also worked for, did not have a career leading up to that job as a prosecutor. He was a civil litigator. He approached things very much from the civil point of view. And myself, being on the civil and environmental team, very much appreciated that, because what that meant is, that was his focus. The civil aspect of our portfolio was much more important to him personally, I would say, than the criminal. Not that the criminal didn't matter, but that's what he was used to. And so that's where what he paid attention to. We all pay more attention to what we're used to. And so over the change in administrations, there's been a big change in terms of the focus of the office. We're now much more of a law enforcement criminal prosecution agency than we were even 3 or 4 years ago, where we were mostly the state's civil litigator. We still have those civil functions, obviously. That's why I have a job. But it's a lot more to do with area of emphasis than really a change in policy. But where do you spend your resources, and where do you spend your time and focus your attention? But let me also say, maybe to kind of get at the heart of your question, Todd, about assuring folks that over time, the way my office operates isn't just R versus D or anything like that. On the civil side that I'm most familiar with, we have a variety of functions outside of just representing a client, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. We provide appellate review of a type in open records appeals. We also do open meetings decisions where folks are trying to get access to the halls of government where decisions are being made. And we sit as a neutral to adjudicate appeals from various state and local agencies who are alleged to have violated the Open Records or Open Meetings Acts. If you take a look at any one of those opinions, they're citing decisions and trying to keep the precedent consistent over Republican and Democratic administrations, sometimes going back decades. So just like a judge, our esteemed jurists here, as Justice Bissek said, you're looking at the law, you're looking at precedent, you're trying to figure out what does the law require of me, even if it's not necessarily what I want to do, or if I was writing on a blank slate, what I would do. We're all beholden to the law. And so we operate much the same way across administrations, across political parties. And the same thing goes for the official opinions of the Attorney General, where we are giving advice to various arms of state and local government on how they need to do their jobs when they ask us for that opinion. We are always looking to keep precedent. Stare decisis is just as important to the Attorney General's office as it is to a court. And so we have long and deep and sometimes painful conversations about that, because we're not looking to just change things wholesale from one administration to the next. And so I do think that the citizens of Kentucky can have a high degree of confidence that whether it's a Republican or a Democrat administration in the Attorney General's office, the real function of what we do is to try to apply the law as neutrally and as faithfully as we can.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. And thank you, yes. Okay, final thing here, and this is, everyone wants something to take. By the way, did everyone go get their swag at all these tables? You guys hang out for just a minute, because I always come by and collect it all. So you want something to take home, right? And it could be like the lollipops or something. But this is why I like Professor Hanka coming every year, because he's going to give you the take home. So, Professor, what does just one of us ordinary citizens do who decides we believe in government under rule of law? We're not real comfortable it's being carried out successfully at all levels of the government. What's a specific action a citizen can do to make sure it is being carried out?
Wonderful thing. The wonderful thing about citizenship is what you're able to control. That citizenship, I've heard this quote from Lee Hamilton. He used to be a congressman across the river. He said citizenship is making your corner of the world just a little bit better. Now, citizens are ordinary citizens like all of us are guided by the rule of law. And we've talked about today of the rule of law protecting us in our rights and liberties. But we have amazing, as citizens, amazing amount of opportunities to make sure that rule of law is maintained. We can do it just simply by obeying the law. You know, it's simple. Obeying the laws are there. They're very clear. If they're not enforced arbitrarily. They're very clear, like this is what you do and you don't do. So obey the law, follow the law. But also a great part of citizenship is making sure that you're involved in the process that influences the making of the laws. So being a part of a lobbying effort to get laws passed in the state, local, state, and federal level. And oftentimes we lose this level of citizenship in terms of being a part of that public square, being a part of the decision making and the deliberativeness that is our representative democracy. That we have this, that we can hold the people that represent us, that we elect, we can hold them accountable, and we have proper ways to do so. And good citizens, ordinary citizens, just need to get in a mindset. They don't not get dejected, not feeling like arbitrariness or politics or things that we sort of mentioned get into the way. Sometimes people don't step up in citizenship because they think the system's rigged, they think the game is rigged, they think the outcomes are already determined, and they're not. And it's about getting involved. It's about participating. Now, a lot of times in our citizenry, we count, the currency for political figures is votes. So it's hard to measure citizenship in other measures. But we know when we vote and how many people vote and don't vote, we know that that's one measure. In terms of, but we're doing a better job in terms of our civic culture of also tracking the other kinds of citizenship, being involved in your community, giving back, volunteering. There's great ways of tracking that. Being an advocate, what I think a big part is being an advocate about something that you're passionate about. As ordinary citizens, it might be trite, but I'm saying you might have heard this, but ordinary citizens, one ordinary citizen can make a difference. They can change the world. And each ordinary citizen can do that one person at a time. But yes, it's the rule of law. How's it? Still follow the rule of law. But then when sometimes you feel like the rule of law isn't always on your side, as a citizen, you can challenge that. You could come to the public square. All of us know that this Jefferson Square has another name sometimes, Justice Square, because of what we're fighting against, or what people are fighting against they see as injustice. So being there, being involved in the public square, being out there, and being engaged. It's not as hard as people think, and we can't be sort of bogged down by that. And also, holding those that we know accountable. We know Louisville's a great place. We know a lot of people who are in positions of authority. We can connect with them. We can contact them. We can make them accountable. We can make folks in Frankfurt accountable. Folks in Washington accountable. That's the beautiful thing about citizenship. Ordinary citizens can do this. The rule of law protects these ordinary citizens from exercising. That's the beautiful thing. Rule of law protects the individual rights and liberties to be able to go and not only follow the law and obey it, but if there's anything we want to change, we go out there and do it. We organize, or we do it one person at a time.
Woo, thank you. Thanks, Professor Hanka. And did you love that part where he looks down at the chief prosecutor and says, well, you can obey the law? I like that. Okay, no, thanks to everybody on the panel this year, and thank you all for manning the tables. Thanks for being here. We're going to have some more music, is that right? All right. A little more of the Wandering Minstrels, and thank you very much for everything. Appreciate it, panelists.